Today we're unboxing a brand new iPhone 11 Pro that's been sealed in its box for over 5 years. And it should be running its original software version, iOS 13. So let's go ahead and get it opened up. And here we have the iPhone. This is definitely an original sealed device. The fact that this plastic has some wear on it is actually a good sign that it's authentic. If it were in perfect condition, I would be more concerned that it was a fake reseal. It's kind of hard to tell here, but I do have the launch color for this device, which is midnight green. Here on the back of the box, we do get confirmation for the midnight green color, as well as the 64GB storage configuration. So rather than being shrink wrapped like older iPhones, this one actually has a pull tab for the plastic wrap. So let's go ahead and pull that now. And the rest just pulls straight up. So here's a better look at this box without that plastic wrap on it. I love how this generation of iPhone used a black box. Let's go ahead and remove the lid from this box. And there we go. Here we have the very gorgeous iPhone 11 Pro. So let's use this pull tab to lift the device up. And there we go. Of course, this iPhone is looking flawless. And this midnight green color is just incredible. It's really cool to take a look at this stainless steel with absolutely no imperfections on it. And it does have this plastic film on the display, so let's go ahead and remove that now. And there we go. That has to be one of the most satisfying sounds ever. And we'll set the iPhone to the side for just a second while we take a look at the accessories. So we do get a literature packet here on top. And this includes a quick start guide as well as a SIM ejector tool and 2 Apple stickers. We also get an 18-watt USB-C fast charging power adapter. And this was really cool to have because all previous iPhones had included a 5-watt USB-A power adapter. But this was one of the last iPhones to include any power adapter at all, as Apple stopped including them in October 2020 with the launch of the iPhone 12. This was also one of the last iPhones to include wired earbuds in the box. So these were the earpods that we had seen since the iPhone 5, and they have a lightning connector as well as a remote and mic. And lastly in here we get a USB-C to lightning cable. And now with the accessories out of the way, let's see if the iPhone 11 Pro will accept a charge after 5 years. And perfect, we do get the charging screen. The charging screen is always a good sign on these. And I say that because some devices that have been sitting in a box for a prolonged amount of time have the batteries go into a state of deep discharge. And basically the device gets stuck in a boot loop where the battery never accepts enough of a charge to start up. Thankfully though, this iPhone is showing great signs of life, so I'll leave it here for several hours to charge up and I'll resume the video when it's ready. Okay, well I've got the iPhone 11 Pro fully charged up now. It actually powered up after being connected to the charger for only a couple minutes. And it reached 100% battery after being connected for around 3 hours. So let's go through this setup process now on iOS 13. And okay, it looks like the device is requesting a SIM card be installed. So I'll take a second now to look into this issue. Okay, well I figured out the whole SIM card thing. The original carrier for this iPhone was Cricket Wireless. And I did not have any SIM cards for that carrier in my collection, so I had to go and purchase one. And now we can continue through this iOS 13 setup. Here in the setup, there's a choice between light and dark mode, and this is pretty interesting because iOS 13 was actually the first to implement a dark mode. And this is pretty interesting too. The setup screen is actually instructing you how to use the swipe up gesture to go home. And this really shows that most users at the time were upgrading from an iPhone 8 or older that still had a home button. And there we go, we are met with the iOS 13 home screen. Let's jump into settings so we can see which version of iOS 13 we have. And okay, it looks like we have 13.3.1 here. So definitely a later version of iOS 13, but that makes sense as I found out the production date for this iPhone is around March 2020. This iPhone 11 Pro was released in September 2019 alongside the standard model iPhone 11 as well as the iPhone 11 Pro Max. So this was the year that Apple settled into their naming strategy that is still used for iPhones today, with the standard numbered model as well as the up-level Pro models. So this was Apple's very first Pro model iPhone. And this was the last iPhone lineup that was announced fully in person, with Apple moving to pre-recorded iPhone announcements as a response to the COVID-19 pandemic. I believe in 2022 they resumed having an in-person audience, but the actual releases were still pre-recorded videos. This iPhone 11 lineup replaced the iPhone XR, XS, and XS Max. And while the models did share a basic design with those, they made some really notable improvements. The most notable of which being the camera changes. So the Pro models now had a 3-camera setup in this triangular arrangement, and the standard 11 had 2 camera lenses. These were all 3 12-megapixel sensors. So you had your main camera, a telephoto camera, and a new ultra-wide camera. We're all used to seeing this camera setup now, but I remember back in 2019, it was extremely shocking. There were actually some memes at the time comparing these camera lenses to a stovetop. But these cameras really performed incredibly well. And that new ultra-wide sensor was so cool to play around with. And although these lenses looked very different, they actually did not stick out very far at all. Comparing to the XR here, you can see that this lens actually sticks out quite a bit more. The iPhone 11 lineup also had a new night mode for the camera. So demonstrating this by covering the camera, you would gain some extra controls for night mode. And that feature really made a huge difference for low light situations. This iPhone 11 Pro here had a 5.8-inch OLED display. The standard iPhone 11 model had a 6.1-inch LCD display, and the 11 Pro Max had a 6.5-inch OLED display. So this was Apple's third iPhone with an OLED display, with that feature starting in the 2017 iPhone X. And the basic design of this iPhone was still really similar to what had started with that iPhone X. So you had this rounded corner design with a stainless steel frame. But the 11 Pro now had this matte finish frosted glass back panel. There was no longer any iPhone text and the Apple logo was now more centered. And this was Apple's last flagship iPhone lineup to have this rounded corner design. You can really trace this general rounded corner design all the way back to the iPhone 6. But Apple switched back to a more squared off iPhone design like the iPhone 4 and 5 models with the iPhone 12 lineup in 2020. And although that squared off design is nice, the rounded corner design is much more comfortable to hold in your hand. Other improvements for the iPhone 11 Pro included faster Face ID recognition, a new 12-megapixel front-facing camera up from 7 megapixels in the previous models, and it received a speed bump over the XS with the A13 Bionic chip. So that was a 6-core chip clocked at around 2.66 gigahertz, and it was paired to the same 4 gigabytes of RAM. But one of the most legendary improvements for the iPhone 11 Pro was longer battery life. It was quoted to have around 4 hours longer battery life than the iPhone XS. And the Pro Max model was quoted to have around 5 hours longer compared to the XS Max. And that was just a huge year-over-year improvement for the battery. And it's actually something that later iPhone models like the 12 Pro went back on. So batteries on those models did not last as long as this 11 Pro did. So I believe the iPhone 11 Pro had some really cool, unique live wallpapers. And yes, let's jump into those right now. So there are 4 here to choose from, one for every color that the device launched in. This lighter blue was for the silver model, and it's so cool to see the animation on these. But this iPhone lineup eliminated the pressure-sensitive 3D touch layer in the display altogether, so rather than force touching on these to have them animate, you would rather just long press. This second green option here, of course, was the default for the midnight green color. So here's a close-up look at the live effect. I'm not sure exactly what these wallpapers were supposed to resemble, but they almost remind me of a wave or kind of like a cloud of smoke. So leave me a comment below with your thoughts on what this wallpaper is. Next up, we have this darker blue color, which was for the space gray model. And here is the animation on that. And lastly, we have this kind of pink color, which was for the gold model. As you can see though, there was also dark mode variations for each of these, so let's go ahead and activate that now. And the dark mode variants do look cool, but I actually think I prefer the light mode variants instead. So let's go ahead and set the default for this color iPhone now. And there we go, that is looking incredible. We'll also take a look at the still wallpapers here on iOS 13. So these 4 different layered color images were new for iOS 13. And they're not animated, but they do have a variant for the dark mode as well. We also have a carryover wallpaper from iOS 12, and I believe the rest of the wallpapers here are carryovers from iOS 11. And lastly, we do have this dynamic category. So there were 14 options here, 7 with black backgrounds and 7 with colored backgrounds. These ones with the black background launched with the iPhone X. So they're great for showing off the true black levels of this OLED display. So now let's talk about the improvements that Apple made for iOS 13. As I mentioned, the dark mode was one of the biggest hallmark features for this version. So this took effect system-wide, and it was even available in third-party applications. It was one of those things that Apple took forever to implement into iOS, but I guess it's better late than never. The Photos app in this version was redesigned with some new features. So this splash screen here is telling us some of the new features for this version. iOS 13 also made some changes to privacy. So you now have more control over your location usage. It could be adjusted to only provide your location while you're using the application. Also, a huge quality of life improvement for iOS 13 was the new volume indicator. So when changing your volume, it would now appear on the side of the screen. In previous versions, it would come up in the center and kind of block your content. There is now a new swiping QuickType feature on the keyboard, and Apple simplified the login in settings to a single sign-on for all of the Apple services. Also, the Apple Music application had real-time song lyrics, and this was the last version with a white music icon, as Apple switched back to a red music icon in iOS 14. Although this version is coming up on 6 years old, I was able to download a lot of applications from the App Store. So these are pretty much all just some classic games, as other apps like YouTube and social media applications will no longer run on this version. So that pretty much concludes my look at this iPhone 11 Pro that's been sealed in its box for over 5 years. It's been such a treat taking a look at this model that's kind of like a time capsule from the 2019-2020 timeframe. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to get subscribed and hit the notification bell. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.